Oh. You can just help. I'm gonna try something because I'm not gonna cut my dress because the back is cut out of this. I'm gonna see if it's too low. Oh my God, I can do it.
Hello, and welcome to our Adulting 101 series, Basic Life Skills for the Recent High School Graduate. These skills are things that every teenager should know, whether you're going to college, whether you're starting your career, or however you're proceeding right now. Today, we are going to be working on budget and finance and everything a new high school graduate needs to know about basic financial information. On June 10th, we will discuss grocery shopping on a budget, how to set your budget, how to do everything that you can to save as much money using coupons, things like that, and how to just be a smart grocery shopper. On June 17th, we'll have cooking basics. You'll specifically learn how to make baked mac and cheese, but you'll also learn the basics of following a recipe, measuring, and all the basic cooking skills that you might need to just put a simple meal on the table. On July 8th, we will do simple sewing. I'll teach you how to sew a button on and how to fix seams and put a basic hem into clothing. On July 15th, we'll talk about laundry and how to keep your clothes as protected as you can while getting them as clean as you can. And finally, our last, on July 22nd, we'll be talking to a couple of young adults about roommates and the art of compromise. Anything that you might need to know about living with someone that you really don't know for the first time. And now I am pleased to introduce Belinda Ellaby, the Outreach Service Coordinator for Financial Literacy for Clayton County Libraries.
Thank you so much, Nell. Thank you for the opportunity to present this information. I am just so excited because this is a subject that I'm very passionate about. Teens, budgeting, finance, and banking. So let's go to the next slide so we can go ahead and dig in. This is just some of the basic vocabulary that we will be mentioning during this presentation: budget, balance, discretionary expense, essential expenses. We'll talk more about income, insurance needs, spending plan, variable expenses, wants, as well as withholding. And so these are just some of the basic terms that you'll hear me talk about. And I would encourage you to take notes and become familiar with them. All right, so let's get started, and you'll go to the next slide, please. Now, this is budgeting. I really like this picture. And if you notice, it's balanced. One side is income and one side is expenses. So it really helps us to appreciate that you'll have one stream of income, but your expenses will vary. So a part of budgeting is finding that balance so that you can have enough income to cover your expenses. And income, it could be your job, sometimes full or part-time. And most of you are students, so it could be your allowance. It could be any way that you generate income, such as babysitting, cutting grass, anything that you could do that would generate income. So that would encompass what would be your income. So let's talk about what a budget is. And can you go to the next slide, please? So now a budget is balancing your expenses with your income. And really, in order to accomplish this, you can't reach your budget because of not having a roadmap, and you can't reach that financial goal without that roadmap. A budget helps you keep track of what you're spending, help forecast and plan for your future. And something that's important here, it talks about written plan made before you receive money, but it's never too late. So let's go ahead and dive in a little bit more on budget. Next slide, please. Now, steps to a successful budget, tracking your spending. And I have tools. One of the tools that I use, it's just a little card where I write down what I spend each day. So many times we don't think about what we're spending if we're not keeping track of it. So writing it down just on a piece of paper, everything that you spend, write it down and make a note. Keeping it simple and pay yourself first, you wonder, wow, that sounds strange, but it's really not. Because if you don't pay yourself first, sometimes you feel like you're working in vain and you want to be rewarded. Making a saving contribution automatically. And we encourage 10%. Now, that's your income. If you're working full-time or part-time, you can have that automatically deposited into your account. And we'll talk a little bit more about banking later. Or you can just set it aside, put it in a safe place, 10% of whatever you earn. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from a job, because some of you may have received monies from graduation, going to high school from middle school, or graduation from high school, preparing for college or preparing for your future. Any income that you get in, make it a point to set aside at least 10% of that. And setting a budget, we encourage you to set a time period of 6 months because it's something that you have to adjust to. So 6 months is a good window to judge achieving your goal. Building an emergency fund, and you think an emergency, well, sometimes being that you are perhaps teenagers, you're not thinking in terms of an emergency, but let's just think about things. Say, for example, if you want to go to camp, or if you want to go on vacation, or let's think about even if you need those certain school supplies that you just really want, setting aside that money to achieve those things is a part of what you would consider emergency fund. But as an adult, what I would consider emergency fund, let's just say I need to buy a tire, or my AC in my home go out, or my refrigerator, or anything that's out of the norm. That is money that I need to set aside so that I can be prepared for, and that would constitute an emergency. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. Additional steps to a successful budget is making sure everyone involved is on the same page. Well, let's just say your parents, if you have a certain amount of money, talk to them about what it is you would like to achieve. Say, for example, if you know you have a vacation coming up, tell them this is what I want to do with some of my money, and have that discussion. Set aside some for whatever your goal is. If it's a vacation, or let's just say you want to buy a new computer, or you want to buy a new cell phone, or some type of electronic device, whatever it is that you have set aside as a goal that you want to achieve, have that conversation so that perhaps they can support you in achieving that goal. And see, that also applies to an adults as well, because me being married, I have to have that discussion with my spouse. Some of the things that I want to do in terms of setting a goal and establishing a budget, we have to have that conversation. And along the way, you have to make adjustments. Sometimes you may want to put a little bit more in savings, or something may have changed where you have an additional expense. And I'll talk about a little bit some of the things that we would consider a part of a budget. Try adding instead of cutting back. That means if your goal is 10% initially set aside, maybe you want to try to at some point reach 20% to save. Pay yourself in cash. And we'll talk a little bit more about why I say that is paying yourself in cash is very important. And then we talk about living within your means. And I'm sure you've heard the saying, don't try to keep up with the Joneses. And because sometimes you don't know what the Joneses are going through, what appears to the eye may not necessarily be what's actually going on. They could be very well drowning in debt. And the Joneses could be your friends, your neighbors, your relatives. Staying within your means um, whatever your income is, you want to stay within that bracket, because if not, if you're spending more than you have, then you are creating um, debt. So let's talk a little bit more about budgeting. Next slide, please. This is what budgeting is. It says having a written spending plan and sticking to it and acting with dignity. And we say dignity, why? Because it means making responsible choices about what to buy and what not to buy. It means that you're concentrating on your needs as opposed to what you want. It means that one item in your monthly budget is saving for the future so that you meet the good goals that you've set aside. And that's what I talked about. Things that you may want to accomplish, that's what that goal is. And we talk about dignity. And just briefly, you'll see that I've used the word dignity a few times in the presentation. Dignity, it's used in reference where life means an opportunity to fulfill one's potential, which is based on having a human level of health care, education, income, and security. Dignity also means having the freedom to make decisions in one's life to be met with respect for this right. Dignity also should be a basic guiding principle for all actions. So it means we want to be responsible. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about banking. Next slide, please. Other people are more likely to treat you with respect when they see that you take your financial responsibilities serious. Because as we mentioned earlier, not wanting to keep up with the Joneses, and sometimes we can't do that. Sometimes we have to be patient and wait. Now, while we talk about banking involved in using a bank or a credit union rather than a check cashing store because it saves you money. Because most check cashing places, they charge you a large percentage to cash your check there. So you're already behind, because if you have to pay $50 to $75 or $100 to cash your check, then that's less money that you can add into what you would consider your budget. Keeping your checking account balanced so that you don't incur overdraft fees due to a bounced check. And that's meaning you've written a check. Most people don't use checks anymore, but still you want to make sure that in the event that you do, you don't write the check for more than what you have in the account. Because now today's overdraft fees is anywhere from $35 to $50. So that's going to come off the top. So once again, you are losing money that you could be really benefiting from. Avoid paying unnecessary fees by using your own bank or credit union ATMs. Because if I bank with, let's just say BB&T, if I go to BB&T and that's where my account is, I'm not charged a fee if I need to take money out of the ATM. But if I take my BB&T card and I go, let's just say to Delta Credit Union, and if I withdraw money, then more than likely that credit union is going to charge me anywhere from $250 to $350 fee to withdraw money from a bank that's not the organization that I originated my account with. So those are little fees, but it really can add up. So we really want to be careful and be mindful that it seems small, but in the end, it does add up. And we're going to talk a little bit about credit scores. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit more about credit. Okay, now, credit scores, and this is how they measure your credit worthiness. And this is demonstrated by how you pay your bills. So you'll learn and hear more about your credit score, because the higher your credit score, the better rates that you get from your money. And the lower your credit score, unfortunately, it means that you're going to pay a lot more fees and a lot more interest. So let's just say the highest credit score right now is estimated about 850. So if you have anywhere from 720 and above, you're considered to have excellent credit. Now, if you have 680 to 719, your credit is good. 620 to 679 is average. So anything below that, it's going to be poor, bad, and miserable. So just to give you a prime example, if I want to go and buy a car and I have a credit score of 720 and above, I could possibly qualify for a 0% interest or 1 or 2% interest for my purchase. But now, if my credit score is anywhere from 550 and below, the likelihood I'm going to be paying 21% interest to purchase that same vehicle. So that's why it's important to maintain a decent credit score. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, because the better your score is indicating that you're being responsible in how you spend and how you save. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's talk about how credit affects and what dictates what your credit score represents. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Miss Belinda?
Yes.
We had an excellent question that I wanted to make sure that we asked. We have the question, are banks better than credit unions?
Well, that's an excellent question. And please, Nell, interrupt me anytime. Are banks better than credit unions? Credit unions are usually owned by members. So it's usually a membership. So credit unions many times are not as large as commercial banks. Credit unions are usually governed by a board. So if possible, you could possibly be elected to be on the board, and they are regulated by that board. And then so the community and the members of that credit union are what governs what happens during that credit union. Of course, they have to comply with the FDIC guidelines, but it's different. Now, for a commercial, a bank, say, for example, if you bank with a particular bank, you might be able to go to various different states, and you can find that bank in Georgia, Alabama, California, North Carolina, Tennessee, anywhere. But the likelihood of having that same opportunity with that particular credit union is going to be pretty slim, because as I mentioned, it is governed pretty much by memberships. Whereas commercial banks, they are much, much larger. But one thing that's important, no matter whether you are a member of a credit union or have your accounts with a commercial bank, it's so important that you build a relationship with whoever you choose, because really that's going to be a large determining factor as to how you get results from your financial institution. Because just say, for example, if you have a friend or you meet someone and you really don't know them, well, after communicating and dealing with them over a period of time, you get to know them. Well, that's the same way with building a relationship with whatever financial institution that you choose, whether it's a bank or a credit union. So it's really kind of a matter of choice. But building that relationship is what's so important to get what you need, because when you're faced with a situation, if you built that relationship, they know you personally. You know, we are more inclined to drive through the ATM for convenience. But I tell you, going inside the bank and meeting the banker, knowing the people at the bank, building that relationship, it carries a lot more weight than just the convenience. So it's kind of a matter of choice. But as I mentioned, you have more choices perhaps with the commercial bank as opposed to with the credit union. Any more questions?
So they did follow up with if you had a specific recommendation for a bank versus a credit union, but it sounds like to me you were saying that it really just depends on how they can build that relationship.
Exactly, exactly. And I would encourage you to shop around. Don't just settle for one. If you are opening an account, go in and talk to the banks to see what they offer. Because many times, if you're a student, if you're a young person, they offer accounts that have no monthly fee, no minimum balance due, and they do have specific products that would be more lucrative for you. So don't just settle for one. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that. Do your research. Go online to see if there are perhaps programs that are allocated for young people, students, or let's just say you don't have any credit. Do they have any programs or provisions that can help you? Okay, now this is kind of what makes up your credit score. So it's so important that you understand this, because let's just think in terms of 100. So 35% of your credit score is represented by your payment history. And what that means is you are paying your bills on time. That is so, so important, because you look at the chart and you see a large percentage of the score is determined by how you pay your bills. So that's why it's so important not to try to keep up with the Joneses, because when you don't, you find yourself not able to pay your bills on time. Now, the amount you owe, this is so, so important because, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Credit is not designed for you to live off of. Credit is really designed for emergencies. So say, for example, and when you have that high credit score, then you're more inclined to get a larger limit when you do need a credit card. So say, for example, if you have a credit card with $1,000 limit, it says the amount you owe is 30%. That means you don't want to owe more than 30% of that balance on that credit card. So if it's $1,000, the most you can charge is $300 so that it doesn't affect your credit negative. Now, once you get a card, you want to keep it, because 15% of your credit score is how long you've had credit. And how long you've had credit, it demonstrates your, first of all, you've been paying on time, you haven't balanced, you haven't overcharged on your credit card and ran it up to the limit, and you've had it for a long time. 10% represents new credit. So say, for example, if you get a car, one, and you've had it for 5 years, you get a credit card, and you've just had it, you just got it. So that new credit card will represent that 10% of new credit, because if it's new credit, you haven't had the opportunity to demonstrate that you will pay it on time. So that's only 10%. And then 10% represents the type of credit. Type of credit means you have a credit card, that's one. You could have an installment loan, that's another. You could have a car, that's another. So that's 3 different types of loans, types of credit that will reflect that you have demonstrated that you are responsible because these various different entities were willing to loan to you. It's so important, and I can't stress it enough. Pay on time. Pay on time. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Let's go on to the next slide, using credit. Next slide, please. Okay, as I mentioned, using credit wisely is very important. It's an example of acting with dignity again. That's demonstrating. You use credit responsibly and avoid going into so much debt, because that's a part of that balancing act. If you're getting in too much debt, your income is going to be the same. But if you're going in too much debt, you don't have the ability to keep your debt and your income balanced. Understand, when you use credit, you need to pay the money back. So because you get $1,000 credit card doesn't mean that I've got $1,000 free money. No, you have to pay it back, because if you don't, there are consequences. And I promise you, it will affect you further down the line. It may seem like right now it doesn't. I've got $1,000 and I've paid it, and I'm okay. No, you're not. It says pay your bills on time and avoid late fees, because when you get $1,000, you don't pay it back. Every month it's accumulating a late fee of $25, $35. That's $1,000 plus every time you don't pay. That's added. So $1,000 really at some point could get to be $2,000 or more if you're not paying it. Avoid those penalties, and including causing it and allowing it to affect your credit score, because those are the type of things that lower your credit score. So we want to use credit wise. On time, pay it back, avoid the late fees. So important. I cannot not emphasize that enough, because I'm sure, I know myself, if I had had this information when I was much younger, I would have avoided a lot of the mistakes that I made, but I learned, and now I've learned how to master my credit and use it wisely, because this information is now available. Okay, let's go to the next slide, and it's going to talk about investing.
Okay, let me ask you one question before you move forward.
Okay.
Someone asked, is Credit Karma a good way to check your credit score?
Well, Credit Karma is a good way to measure. And what I really like about Credit Karma, because I can look at and I have it on my phone, so I can look at it just to kind of keep track of what my credit score is doing. And let's keep in mind, there's a lot of scam that's going on, and Credit Karma is a way that you can check quickly to see if there is perhaps some irregular activities happening on your account. So Credit Karma is good, but Credit Karma may not be accurate as of what it is today. So it's a good way, and it's a good tool that's provided that you don't pay for, just to help you keep track. Because and you'll get a chance with Credit Karma, you'll see that there is 3 different companies: TransUnion, Equifax, Experian, I think it's one more, that have different scores. And on Credit Karma, it shows you Equifax and it shows you TransUnion. So you'll get a chance to see a gauge of what your credit score is. So it is a tool to use to gauge. but there are a lot of factors that go in that shows that Credit Karma might not be up to date today. Because say, for example, if I mailed off a payment and I've paid off a card, well, Credit Karma may not reflect that card has been paid off. But it is a good way to gauge, to kind of keep an eye on your credit. All right, next, please. Okay, now the best way to start learning, and this is something that is so important, and we do have a recording on our YouTube channel where we talked about youth investing. We encourage you to learn about investing, learn the basics. It's best to be informed. You have CDs, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and learning about financial theories like diversification, compounding, and market efficiency. These are things that you need to know about because we'll talk a little bit more about why I say saving is important. You want to set goals. You want to see how your money can benefit you and how you can use your money effectively. You want to determine risk tolerant levels. And just say, for example, would a loss of a significant amount of money give you a heart attack? Or do you love fast cars and the thrill of the risk? And that's something you have to determine, because for me personally, I don't like to lose. And so as far as that thrill, I'm not eager about the thrill. So I want to have a better idea of how to invest my money and what are risks and what's to my advantage. So you have to determine where you are in that category. Are you a risk taker or are you not? And for me, I'm not a risk taker. So becoming informed about investing, and that's something that we encourage you, because young people today, that information is made available for you. And I have to say, here in the Clayton County Library System, we have titles on all of the subjects that I'm talking about today that you can come in and learn about those subject matters, because it's so important now to be informed. And the fact that that information is made available to you, we encourage you, come in outdoors and let us assist you. So we're going to talk about how to get started. Next, please. Can I get the next slide, please? Okay, types of investments. This is just a brief sample of some of the investment types. And as I mentioned, ask about these type of classes so that you can find whether it's income paid, fixed term, face value, market. You want to know stocks, bonds, mutual funds. And when you decide if you want to go to a bank or a credit union, these are conversations also that you can have with your banker, because they can inform you how to invest your monies so that you can get the best possible return. So we encourage you, definitely inquire, become familiar with this, because it is so important. Next slide, please. Saving and investing. Saving and investing help you to have a good life. And what we're talking about a good life, we're not necessarily talking about becoming rich and famous and wealthy. We're talking about making sure that you're prepared and you have the necessities that you need in order to live a comfortable life, which young people, it allows you to achieve long-term goals, such as going to college or perhaps going to a trade school so that you can get a job. And we're talking about a good job, or purchase a home, making sure you have money to cover emergencies without going into debt. Now, we talked about emergency monies for adults, but still, even as young people, you need to establish your emergency fund, not just for fun things, because many times, even young people, you encounter situations where you need to have money, and sometimes you might need to have money, sometimes just to assist your parents or your grandparents. Saving and investing, helping you to understand making your decision a reality takes hard work, discipline, and patience. And these are qualities that we all desire to have. So, the get rich quick, if you get rich quick, you lose it probably quicker. So, we encourage you to be disciplined. When you get that money set aside, when you have to be patient, because we talked about a good life, but then also having dignity and demonstrating dignity also prepares you for the qualities of life that we all want to have, which is work hard, discipline, and have patience, which equals success. All right, so now let's go to the next, and we're going to summarize some of what we've talked about. Now, create a budget. Know your income and your expenses. Yes, for adults, that means your income is a job. Sometimes it's full time, part time, and sometimes you have to work a second job. But you need to know your income. You need to know your expenses. And just to kind of give you an idea, as an adult, your budget workshop, saving at the top. Then, of course, you need housing. So we're talking about rent or mortgage. We're talking about food, groceries. But now we also encourage you to include eating out, because now life is boring if you feel like you can't do any of the things that you enjoy. So you want to allocate for those. So if you enjoy eating out, I'll tell you example, one of my colleagues shared when his boys was young and they would go out to eat. If the waiter or the waitress asked if they wanted a beverage, they would say no. And so they would ask why. And because his boys would say, well, the reason why we don't get beverages is because we have to pay for it. So they chose to use their money more wisely for other things that was more important as opposed to a beverage. So learning that how you use your money is so important. It doesn't mean you can't go out and can't do some of the things that you want to do, but it does mean that you have to make wise decisions. You know, even when you, are spending your parents' money, you need to make wise decisions. Clothing, it's a must. We get older, you get older, your clothes get smaller, you need larger sizes. So that has to be included in the budget. Transportation, are you going to use MARTA? Are you going to get a used car, a new car, or maybe a bicycle? That's something you have to think about. You have to have transportation, utilities, credit card payment. Nowadays, you've got cable internet, you've got cell phone. And of course, you're going to allow entertainment in your budget, such as music, movies. Sometimes you might have to download your music as opposed to going and buying music. Well, back in my day, we could go buy 45s, albums, CDs, 8 tracks, you name it. But now you can download. So you have to allocate monies for your entertainment. Then student loans, if you have them, and we'll talk just a little bit about that later. And then retirement investment. I'm retired, but I work part-time. And when I was working full-time, I allocated money so that once I retired, I would have income coming in so that I could maintain the lifestyle that I had grown accustomed to from my teenage years up to now. So all of these things you have to really think about. And all of that goes into that budget. And it does require you to be balanced because income and your expenses, you've got to balance. And all of those things that I just mentioned are some of the things that are, all of those are things that you have to include in your balance, in your budget at some time or another. And as I mentioned, start saving early. It's never too early and it's never too late. And as I mentioned, as much as possible, 10 to 20% of your income, whether it's your allowance, whether it's money you receive from graduations, or however you get your money, maybe doing summer jobs, Six Flags, Chuck E. Cheese, or any income that you go in, you get, you want to make sure that you save. Pay credit cards every month on time. And if at all possible, try to pay that balance off in full. As I mentioned, saving money for a rainy day, we encourage you to have 3 to 9 months. And this seems to be a lot, especially for young people. But in order to have a successful life, these are some of the things that you have to do. Set short-term goals, saving accounts, CDs, money markets, long-term goals, inexpensive index funds, and that's something you want to learn about. And as I mentioned, shop around for deals. Don't just settle for the first thing. Go to the different banks because they all offer different services because their objective is to get your business. So make sure that you shop around. You have any questions now?
No, ma'am, not currently.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. All right, tips for college. Now, we say watch out for banks that offer credit cards. You know, it used to be a time that it was hard to get credit cards, but now, being that I'm the financial literacy outreach coordinator, I see where credit card companies offer teenagers credit cards. Be careful. Be careful because when you get those cards, it can make or break your future because those people are going to get their money. And it may start out a small amount, but if you don't pay them, you're paying interest rate and you're paying late fees. But sad to say, those credit cards could affect your ability to buy a home later because those are the type of things that affect your future. And it's unfortunate, there are some credit card companies out there that seek out young people. So be careful. If you decide to sign up for a credit card, get one. Get one and use the tips given to build up your credit. You want to pay it on time. Don't max it out. Don't lend it out and don't give it to someone else to use. Because once you give it to someone else to use, you are responsible for it. So we encourage you to make sure that you use credit wise. Credit is not designed for you to live off of. Credit is designed for you to use when in emergency. It's like using somebody else's money, but using it responsible until you can get the money to pay it back, or you use it to build credit, not to live off of. Because as I mentioned earlier, the better your credit score, the less you pay. That's just a given fact. So, and we can determine how much we pay when we want to make large purchases by how we use the credit that we get. Be serious. All right, next slide, please. Scholarships and grants. You know, this is another way to use someone else's money. First of all, being good students. Being good students mean that entitles you to scholarships that you can get that will help pave the way for college or technical schools. Scholarships are available on a broad base of applicants based on your academics, your merits, your talent, community service, being your athletic abilities, your gender, doesn't have to be repaid. So that's why it's so important that we get good grades in school. You're not just pleasing your parents. Of course, they're happy when you get good grades because you apply yourself, you study so that you can learn. Those are factors that pave the way for the future. And when your parents talk to you about the importance of doing your best in school, the purpose of that is so that you can get scholarships to advance your education. I tell you, my niece was an A student, and she graduated from high school and went to college and had a full ride. She didn't pay for no books, no housing, no classes or anything. So when she graduated, she was able to get a car paid for because her parents, her aunt, her cousins didn't have to fork out money for her to go to school. We were able to reward her for her efforts and her good grades doing school so that when she graduated, we hadn't spent a whole lot of money for her to go to school. So we didn't mind. We did not mind rewarding her with something that she really wanted once she graduated from college. So she applied herself during high school. It's tough, and I commend all students today because this past year has been a trying year for most of the students today. And it was hard. So those that were successful, I applaud. And for those that didn't as well as they wanted to, I applaud them for the effort because this year was a hard year for our young people. And grants are based on needs, first generation students, family income, location of college. And this also can be money that you don't have to pay back, but you still have to study hard and you have to pass those classes. So there's a lot of grant money out there. And once again, I can say that a lot of these opportunities were not available when I was going through high school. So now take advantage of it so that once you get out of school, you're not in $100,000 worth of debt from school. Get good grades, do well in school so that you'll be prepared for your future. This way, you can get out of school and your income go to your cost of living as opposed to a large portion of your income going into paying back student loans. Now, of course, there are loans in the event for some reason you don't qualify for scholarships. There are loans, but know that you have to pay them back. Know that you have to pay them back. So that's why it's so important to do your best now to get those scholarships, get those grants, go to those schools that can prepare you for success. You have federal loans as well as private loans. So learn more about them. Do your best. Do your best because we want the best for you. And here at the Clayton County Library System, we're passionate about presenting this information because we want you young people as well as adults to be prepared. Because I found that many adults benefit from the financial education workshops that we offer here at this library system because we didn't get it. And some of us, it's never too old to learn. It's never too old to learn. So I just want to say thank you so much, Nell, for offering this opportunity to me to present this fine information. Are there any questions? And now's the opportunity to take advantage to ask any questions you think you might have.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Ms. Belinda, for presenting this information that is so important, because I agree with everything that you said as far as I wish I had known a lot of this when I was younger.
Mhm.
I do not see any questions currently. So I just, again, I want to say thank you so much for presenting this information. Is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
Okay, next slide, please. All right, this is my email and this is also Nell's email. If you all have any questions, feel free to email us so that we can answer your questions. But here at the Clayton County Library System, we have a wealth of information. I have forms and that can assist you in starting and establishing a budget. And there's no age limit, whether you're an adult or whether you are a student. We have a wealth of information. We have so many titles in the library system. The library isn't the way it used to be. Back in the day when I was in school, you had to be quiet in the library. You couldn't talk, you had to whisper. Now the library is very interactive. And I have to say, we do have a director that's a visionary. She has so many visions for our library system, but I also have to say that we have a wealth of staff here that are visionaries as well, that has a wealth of knowledge. And I just want to thank all of those staff members that have been involved, Dana, Marquita, Nell, that have assisted in making this possible, because I want to say thank you all for your support, because without you, we could not present this information. I always close my workshops by saying, knowledge is of no value if you do not share it. Check out the Clayton County Library System. Share this information. This information will be posted. So if you have friends or family that didn't get a chance to see it, encourage them to go and review it. Thank you so much. And it has been a pleasure to present this information to you. We're living in some challenging times. I encourage each and every one of you to be safe, take care, and look for brighter futures. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Ms. Belinda. Don't forget, next week we'll show you how to stretch your dollar at the grocery store with Ms. Kim from headquarters.